Taoiseach, we are one of the richest countries in the world. We're now heading into Christmas with over 13,000 people homeless, and 4,000 of those are children. Many of them have been homeless for several years now. So it is a stain on our society, and frankly a shame on a government, and such a wealthy society that should be the case. So I have a very simple question, like, what hope can you offer those families, those children who are homeless as to when they are going to get a home of their own? Can you give us any indication of when you think the figures will fall that have been rising every single month? And can I particularly point you to the fact that the number of families in homelessness and trapped in homelessness is rising? Because of the push by us, which you've adopted to some degree, to purchase 1 and 2 bedroom, mostly 1 and 2 bedroom apartments and homes, but there's a serious deficit of family accommodation to provide for families that are in homeless, and those numbers are rising. What have you got to say about that?
Deputies Boyd Barrett, Murphy MacDonald, Conway Walsh raised the issue of homelessness. And as things stand, there are 13,000 people who are currently in state-provided emergency accommodation. That could be a hostel, it could be a hotel, it could be B&B. In some cases, it's an own-door apartment. The numbers on the street, thankfully, are much, much lower, in around 100 or 200, and they're very often people who, for different reasons, decide not to accept the shelter that might be available to them. Nonetheless, it is far too many, and that's particularly the case in relation to families and children. And our objective as a government is to reduce the overall number of people in emergency accommodation considerably, and that where people experience homelessness, it should be rare, should be short-lived, and crucially should not be repeated, because it is terrible to see some people going in and out of homelessness, and that's very distressing for them and indeed for all of us. What's our plan? It's prevention, it's more social housing and more places for people to rent in the private sector. So prevention involves measures, for example, like extending notice to quit periods so people have more time to find alternative accommodation. It's the tenant in situ scheme, where we buy houses and apartments off landlords who are thinking of selling up, so that the social housing tenant in there who might be on HAP tenancy can be regularised and become a normal social housing tenant. It's increasing the amount of social housing we're building. This decade will break all records since the foundation of the state in terms of the amount of social housing being built, and of course it's more HAP tenancies as well. Just pick up on Deputy Conway Walsh's point. We are providing more domestic violence refuges, and they're being built around the country, and also more safe houses as well, which are an alternative, and sometimes a better alternative to refuge, depending on the individual circumstances. But we all know this is a complex situation, perhaps more so than the opposition would like people to believe. And as all of us know, working with people who are experiencing homelessness, every individual and every family has a story and has a lived experience, and they can be very different indeed. For example, there are some people in emergency accommodation who might not be entitled to social housing because they already own a share in a house. It's a case of family breakdown. The family's broken up, there is a house, but obviously one person lives in the house and the other person can't, and that can make it very complicated to resolve. And of course, the profile of people in emergency accommodation has changed. We're now up to about 44% of people in emergency accommodation who are not Irish citizens. It was less than 20% not that long ago. And while some of those people are entitled to social housing, some are actually not and will never get social housing, and could be in emergency accommodation for an indeterminate amount of period. And that wouldn't have been the case if we were talking about this back in 2010 or 2012 or 2014, or certainly not to the same extent.